Gashamaniacs.
GeoGearHeads.
Welcome to 289 of the GeoGearHeads, and we're going to be talking again about attending megas and kind of by proxy Gigas, because no one on the show has ever been to a Giga event, because, you know, we're in North America and don't have the cash for it. But
that's much it.
But by that, I mean Chris of the Northwest, my usual co-host. Welcome back, Chris.
Thank you very much. It's so good to be back in my normal studios, Daryl. And, you know, this is a great subject. I really like going to these large events. Now, I really am, as I heard the term this week, jonesing to go to a Giga event.
Aren't we all?
I'm really hoping one will come here in the Northwest, you know, this summer, but I'm not sure.
Gee, I can't imagine which one you're talking about.
I can't
we
either.
also have Memphis Mafia to complete the hat trick of Geocache Talk hosts. Welcome to the show again.
Good evening, everybody.
And you perhaps have the most unique perspective of anyone on the show, having worked on, were you actually on the committee, or were you just working with the committee of Geo Woodstock 14er?
I was on the committee. I had a smaller role. I don't even want to try to claim that I did as much as some of the other people. My wife and I helped out with a few different things, but I learned a lot. Learned a lot from being on the committee and seeing the background stuff.
And I can imagine, which is part, not entirely, but part of the reason why we asked you to be on, because we figured you'd have some good perspective on that others might not have.
Yeah, it's I've been to far fewer megas than you guys have, but they're very different. Each one, I learned something different from each one, and each one was really a very different experience, and it's going to shape which ones I pick to go to in the future.
It's quality, not quantity.
Sure. Sure.
Didn't sell you on that one, did I? It's quality, not quantity. Does the voice help?
Yes, now I'm all in.
Okay, good. Good. That's what I was going for.
Just for reference, if anyone doesn't know or has forgotten, Groundspeak has a weird definition for mega and giga. In the case of the megas, which is what most of us are used to, it's 500 attendees. So you have to have your event attended by at least 500 people. However, for gigas, it's 5,000 people. So yeah, they don't seem to understand what mega and giga mean, which they did acknowledge when they came out with the giga event.
They count funny.
Yeah. And there's all kinds of weird loopholes, but it is supposed to be people, not the attended logs. And that gets a little bit squirrely in some cases, as I understand it.
Yeah, I've been to a few different ones. Two of the ones I went to back to back were extreme differences in number of people attended. Not that you have any like clicker at the door, but after the Geo Woodstock we were talking about just a second ago, shortly after that, I attended the Earth Cache, the 5th International Earth Cache Mega.
Mm-hmm.
Not the same crowd.
No.
There was
the requirements were that you had at least one event with 500 attendees before you can get the mega status.
Mm-hmm.
Originally, they weren't holding tight to that because megas were new. But now you have to have had at least one mega event to get the mega status the next year. And you have to adhere to a bunch of different rules, one of which is you can't have any other location-based game as a sponsor. So there are some what would be mega events that have opted not to, just because they don't want to have to deal with the mega nonsense.
You know, I wasn't aware that you couldn't have any other location game-based game as a sponsor.
Yeah, that happened about 7 or 8 years ago, I think. I can't remember, but I know there was a huge turmoil. And the reason was that Garmin's Open Caching was sponsoring a bunch of the events. So geocaching.com, formerly Groundspeak, and it was Groundspeak at that point, got annoyed and, nixed it.
Gonna take my ball and go home.
Yeah. And their argument is we put a significant amount of marketing into the mega events, and therefore, we can say this. Okay, fine. So, in any case, why don't we run through the mega events that we've each attended, and then we can get into the meat.
Very cool. You want to start? Or my list is a lot shorter.
We'll go in the order of number attended.
So least to
least to most. So
okay, well, I've got that one first. So that fifth International Earth Cache that we attended, I checked today, and it has 120 attended logs on it. When I was there, now the interesting thing is, it was the most organized I've ever seen. Of course, there was hardly anybody there, so it's it was very well organized, and I think they could have handled a huge number of people. When I was there was maybe 100 people there at the time, but it was it was a longer event, so people were in and out. But I didn't stay very long. I'm not a huge Earth Cache person, so it didn't take me long to meander my way through all the vendors and everything else. But that has to be the smallest mega that I've seen, unless y'all have one to beat that.
No, I don't think so.
No,
I know that from my list, I don't have anything that got quite that small.
This one, and I'm not talking negative about it. It was a very well organized. GSA was organizing it. They definitely had their stuff together. There just wasn't a lot of people there, at least at the time that I was there. I don't know how they calculate numbers or whatever, but
so it got a mega status from the year previous and just carried that over, and they hope for the best.
I think so. And I think, if you looked at the ones before that, 4 and 3, which I don't know without looking at it, but I think one was in Germany and one was in like Hawaii or something. They were well attended.
In Maine.
Maine?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but
I
looked at them before and they were well attended.
Yeah, they had it I think at Delorme's headquarters actually for the first one.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, and this one was not but a couple months after Geo Woodstock 14er in the same city.
Yeah.
So maybe people were like, I got my mega for the year, so I don't know.
So what are some of the others you hit?
Okay. So it's funny too, because the very first one we hit, and so I've only attended 6, and each one I learned a very different lesson from. The very first one was GeoCoin Fest here in Denver in 2012. Well, we didn't start caching until later in 2011. So when it showed up here in 2012, we had no idea what a mega was. It's like, oh, cool, a different type of event. And I heard people talking about it, but I didn't really know that many cachers at that point. And we had attended maybe 3 or 4 local dinner events at the time. So we're like, oh, it's down in Denver. It's something different. It's a different icon. Let's go check it out. Had no idea. We show up. It's like at a hotel, center deal. And as soon as I walked in the parking lots and I saw the travel bugs on all the cars, I was like, this is different. This is different than our local dinner event. And we get inside, and there was a lot of people there at that one. I don't know the numbers or anything for it, but it was definitely an eye-opening thing for us. My whole family was there, so we're like, oh, there's actually more than just our family doing geocaching in this area. It was definitely different. But we followed that up by, after that, the next mega we went to was 3 or 4 years later, 3 years later maybe. It was GeoCoin Fest in Omaha. That was pretty neat, seeing the second version of the same event now that we knew what was going on. So it was at Air and Space Museum. I don't remember the exact name of the thing it was at, but it was neat. It was well organized, went through, had other stuff to see. They gave away prize. I won a prize and didn't even enter a contest, so that was pretty cool. But somebody entered for me and I won a prize. A GPS, in fact. So so that was pretty nice. But it was neat seeing a second version of the same one. So we saw Mega again now that we understood what they were. So that was pretty cool. But and then that takes the next one we went to after that was Geo Woodstock. So we'd got a lot more involved, had been on the state group for a while and gotten further into geocaching and got invited to help out with the Geo Woodstock here. And that was huge. There were, I don't even know how many people the final tally was, but you know, it was a few thousand anyway. And quite a different learning experience seeing the inside of a committee for a geocaching mega. Amazing amount of work that goes into that for the people behind it that do it. So learned a whole lot from that. Followed that up with that Earth cache one we talked about, and then that takes us up to this year where we've done 2 megas this year. Totally different experiences. I don't know if you've been to these or not, but the Texas Geocaching Association mega. So they have a big contest, and all the whole state is split into regions, into 4 regions plus out-of-staters, and they have this big contest in town. Very neat experience seeing the contest. Got me super excited for the contest. Gary and I were working the booth there, so we didn't do the contest. We just saw people, talked to people, saw the stuff that's going on, talked to the organizers. But I got super charged up and heard about Moga after that, and that by far has been my favorite event that I've heard of or been to. We went to Moga in Kansas and did the competition there. There's an individual and team competition. How cool, right? So Moga had everything going on. They had all the normal stuff that megas have, but they had this multiple competitions, and Joshua called before that and has, hey, let's put a team together and let's go do Moga. I'm like, sure, don't know what that is, but let's go do it. That sounds like fun. But it was great. We get there, and you know, it's like one of those punch card competitions. You got to go find them, and lo and behold, we won. Look at this. I got some hardware from that one. Woo!
What?
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, that's the big team competition Moga Cup, and we even got medals too. It's always cool when you get to come away with hardware, right? But so that was really cool. Now it helps that the first one we go to, we get on a team and we win. That always helps you, appreciate a mega. But yeah, very cool new aspect to geocaching that's not a normal thing. Competitions when you get there, right? So very cool. And each of those 6 completely different type of events and things we learned from it and people we talked to and everything else. So lots of fun for us.
You really have, the way I see it, 2 totally different types of events that you've gone to in there. I mean, everyone is totally different, but you have the like the gatherings, the convention type ones, and then you have the competition ones. So quite a bit of variety in just 6 events.
Yeah, and I'd love to. Now we've already decided we're going back to Moga after the last one. We're absolutely going back. We've already got our hotel reservations for next year, and we're going back to that one. That was too much fun.
You just have to defend the title.
Absolutely, we got to go back and defend the title, right? But and there's other reasons I liked Moga too. Very well run, and there's many reasons that we could list all day long. But I really want to try to hit as many different types over the years. Not all in one year, but many different types of megas as I can, because they are so different. Some of them you dress up for, some of them you have content. Camping, like that one that was in New York is camping. Well, that's great. There's tons of different types, and I'd love to hit as many different types over the years as I can.
Yeah. Now, Chris, you've got a shorter list than I do, but some of the same events. And actually, if you count the black parties, I think you actually beat me as far as total attendance.
No, I think you're still 1 or 2 ahead of me.
Okay.
Now, we both went to Geo Woodstock 8, which was right here in my hometown. So I had to go to that one, right?
Absolutely.
When it's that close, you have to go. Now, Daryl, you flew a little farther, but you still came to that one as well.
Well, and I had to go to that one because that was Geo Woodstock, and you also went to the Lost and Found celebration, yes, which was a non-mega, and that one has its own icon. So, I had to get that one.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, that was definitely a mega event, even though because it's its own icon is outside of the megas on the website. After that, in the next year, in fact, we went to Darryl, Geo Woodstock 9 in Pennsylvania, I believe, right?
Yep, and that's where we had the podcast studio set up.
Yeah, and that was fabulous. I haven't seen anything quite like that since.
No, that was a chore to get it set up and done, and I don't really want to do that again.
Oh, we need to get a sponsor to set that up for us.
Yeah,
and we just walk
next time
into a completed studio and ready to go.
Exactly, we hire that part out and rent the hardware because renting the van and driving all that gear down was not a fun job.
No. And gathering all the gear was not fun. So
no.
That same year, 2011, I went to Going Ape all over again. That is a mega event the week following, or the day following Geo Woodstock at the Ape Cache here in Washington State. Now, since that time, since Geo Woodstock 8, they've done the hike up to the Ape Cache. I want to say it probably was a mega, but it took a year. The first one didn't count as a mega. And,
right. Well, and that first one was organized because there were so many cachers coming to town. Right, it was definitely a mega, and they just needed some way, especially because the tunnel was closed, to deal with all of the people, because there was no way that they could do the parking in the one little parking lot. I think it fit like maybe a dozen cars.
Yeah,
and the expectation.
There are other parking spots nearby, but not a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it would have been a long, nasty walk for some people who weren't that physically fit to handle it. So this was their solution, and I think a very good one. They had the bus ride from the grounds to the parking area where they dropped you off, and then you had to go hike it from there. And, it was a little party at the pickup drop-off point. At the I think it was actually the parking lot that you would normally park at,
right,
were the tunnel actually open.
No, not quite. There's a bigger parking lot there, and anyway, now Darryl, I remember you saying you could basically hold hands all the way up the trail. People were that tight.
Yeah, and I got to see the Ape Cache, but I don't think I actually got to touch it.
Okay.
The logbook was being passed around. They had a guy in an ape suit up there, and everyone's taking pictures with the guy in the ape suit and the Ape Cache open and in their hands. It's like, I'm not waiting in that line. Just give me the logbook. I'm out of here. We got to hit Iron Horse.
Yes. So next year, another ape event. And went there. Those I've really enjoyed those. Let's see. I went to Going Ape 2016 last year. I guess that wasn't a mega event, was it? I was going to say
they lost it.
I've walked the tunnel twice, ridden my bike once through it. Maybe I've walked the tunnel 3 times. Riding the bike was definitely the way to go. Take your bikes up there.
Oh yeah.
After that, in 2014, I went to another Geo Woodstock. That was 12.
That was the one that we went to together in St. Louis.
That was a good one. That one I thought was very well organized.
Yeah. Yeah, I really liked that one, and it was the most different of any of the Geo Woodstocks I've been to, but I'll get into that later.
And just this year, in fact, just a couple of weeks ago, I went to the 2017 Tri-Cities GeoCoin Challenge right here in the great state of Washington. And, they do that every year. And just in the last couple of years, has it become a mega event. I don't have my coins. I have them upstairs. This year, I got a set of 4 coins and a holder for them. What's that, stand?
Right.
Really well done. Really well done.
Nice.
And of course, we talked about the Lost and Found celebration that was a mega, but wasn't officially. And I think that's the same with all the other block parties. There have been 5 total. I know
the block party had its own icon again.
Exactly. I know there was more than 500 people there. I've been to each one, had a booth set up, and there were people just streaming in. So
Yeah, and I'm kind of upset I didn't get to any of the block parties because I really wanted to do the bookends for the Lost and Found celebration and the last one, but it just wasn't in the cards.
Sometimes that happens.
Yeah, indeed. Now, I've gone to a total of 14 megas and then the one Lost and Found. But my first one was the 2007 Midwest GeoBash, which was in Indiana, and that was the very first year they had megas. So it was this and the Geo Woodstock were the two mega events that year. And that was like the only two, if I remember. Texas might have gotten it that first year as well, but I can't really recall off the top of my head. So 2007 is when the mega events were instated, and I went to the first year of mega events. Then I went to a Geo Woodstock 6 in California, which really was my favorite of the Geo Woodstocks, but not necessarily because of the planning. I just liked the Geo Woodstock location that they picked. There were a bunch of caches around, so it really flowed nicely. GeoCoin Fest 2008 in Pittsburgh, then followed that up with Geo Woodstock 8 in Pennsylvania, then GeoCoin Fest 2010 in the Twin Cities. That was a lot of fun, but that was probably the smallest of them that I hit, and that was in a hotel not far from the Mall of America. Then Geo Woodstock 9, Midwest GeoBash 2012, 2013. My first West Bend Cache Bash was in 2013 as well. Really enjoyed that one. Then Geo Woodstock 12, Midwest GeoBash 14, 15, and 16. And of course, this weekend is 17, and I'm going to that one as well. Then, last year, I got to go to West Bend once again. And that one is just awesome. If you ever get a chance to go to West Bend for the Cache Bash, I highly recommend it. It's a good cache.
I would love to go to that one. I've heard so many people talk about it, and I've never heard anybody say anything negative about it. Just the caches in the area, and that the whole area just really adopts caching for that, at least for that time as well.
Oh, it's insane. They still have a lot of the early caches active. So you can go and find old caches in town. And it's incredible. The story I love to tell is one of those large pill bottles wrapped in camo tape with magnets on it, stuck to the outside of the stop sign in front of the police station. You feel incredibly weird trying to get that because there's police cars coming and going. They're just waving hi because they know what you're doing, and it's insane. But awesome caches. There's so many of them that they keep having to go further out. There's power trails that you can do. We did 102 caches, I think it was, in just over an hour on one of the power trails after we got done with the day's events.
That's a lot.
There's 2 geo trails in town that you can do. There's 2 different coins that you can get for doing that. And I believe that they actually have the coins at the event. So if you finish your passports, you get to get your coins right there, if I remember. And it really is an amazing event all the way around. And it's planned out pretty much all year round, and they do it in the same spot. It's people who know what they're doing year after year, so you get that benefit, which is one of the nice things too about the Midwest GeoBash is it's the same group doing it in the same event year after year. You get like the Geo Woodstocks and now Moga. They're moving it around with a different committee every year, which is also nice, but you don't get the expertise of and the experience of having done it at that location multiple years, and that group hasn't put together that event year after year. Now, a lot of the Geo Woodstocks and the Mogas, they've already put on other mega events, so at least you have some of that skill, some of that knowledge that's been built up. but it's very different because they don't know what to expect from the grounds that they've selected. You have to kind of experience that firsthand. So do expect some problems because no one knows. And any kind of event, no matter how big or small, you're always going to find some issues.
Oh, yeah.
It could be something like someone would have porta potties delivered and oops, they didn't deliver them or didn't deliver enough. That happened at least 2 of the Geo Woodstocks that I recall.
We had an issue with food trucks. So you can plan everything you want. And we had contracts with several food trucks, and only about half of the food trucks showed up. Well, that's your only choice for food on this whole grounds of our venue. And it doesn't matter that they're under contract if they don't show up. I mean, that doesn't help the day after. So
Right.
we had to scramble, and we had to send people out to try to round up food trucks in town and send them over to our location. But it's the day of, and it's a busy, around 4th of July type weekend. And in Denver, everything is booked everywhere. And there's nothing you can control about that. You can book it 6 months out, and if it's a porta potty or if it's food and they don't show up, you're just pretty much in trouble.
Absolutely.
Try to scramble.
And that's one of the good tips too, I think. As much as I love eating at the mega events, and I usually try to because it's a social experience, it makes it easier because you don't have to bring the food. Always carry something as backup because you never know what's going to happen. And water has been an issue at a lot of these events as well, where for whatever reason they didn't have enough water, whether it be the grounds didn't have potable water. They only had water for cleaning and flushing toilets, and they didn't realize that, or whatever. Bring your water, bring your snacks. And what am I trying to think of the name? I can't remember it now. But like the Cliff Bars are the ones that I tend to like. They're great emergency food kind of things. So bring that kind of stuff. Especially if you are planning on eating, it's nice to have that.
Well, and being on the other side of organizing too, the other thing that you can't plan for is how many people are going to be there. So will attends really don't give you any idea of who's going to show up at an event. Some people log their will attends. The biggest surprise on the one we did was the early packet pickup. So we had an event before the event that was at a restaurant, and it was for the early packet pickup. So you could pick it up there so you didn't have to get in line at the event. And I think maybe 200 people said they were will attend, that will be there to pick up our packet. And we had about almost 2,000 people show up throughout the day. It was almost everybody. So nobody will attended that. They will attended the regular event. And it was, people were just streaming. There was 200 people. There was like 200, 300 people there before the event ever started. More than had ever will attended. We're like, oh, we don't even know how to plan for this. It worked. Everybody got their stuff eventually, but the lines are long. You want a big mega event, and that's what you're going to get. You're going to get lines of people. So the place that we booked, they were cool. They're like, hey, you didn't know how many people were going to be here. The restaurant grounds, they were great with it. I mean, they were selling food left and right. But there's just no way to predict when you have 5, 6, 7 times more people than will attend. You can't predict that, right? So
absolutely.
That's always interesting. And you just, when you go to a mega event, mega means lots of people. That means lots of people. So
yeah, and we've seen the attendance much higher than expected and much lower expected, and it depends on so many factors with these mega events. If you have adverse weather, whether it's being too hot or being rainy or whatever, you do have people who drop out. In some cases, it's because they can't get the plane to go to the event. So
That's right.
It does happen, and we've heard of, especially with like the Geo Coin Fest seem to suffer this. They have a lot of people who do the will attends and then just don't show up for whatever reason. It's not that hard for it to go either way, where you get too many or too few. But that tip about going to the early registration, if you can, is critical. And that's one of the things DeBear, I think it was on our last episode, brought up, is definitely do this, because if you do the pre-events and pick up your packet, you don't have to wait in line. And no matter when you do it, it's going to be a line. But if you do it the day before, you're not taking away time at the event the next day when you could be spending the time doing something else.
Well, and with the other thing that I always say every time I talk to anybody or I'm on a show or anytime we're talking about mega events, as people that haven't been involved with them, they don't necessarily know how they run. And there's a misconception that Groundspeak is, while they regulate mega events, they don't really help put them on. So there's this misconception that there's some seed money or there's some special stuff that people that organize these events get, and there's not. It's a group of cashers, no matter, and there's different types of them, obviously, groups that put them on, but it's all them. It's all of those cashers coming up with all the money to do everything themselves. There's no like mega event fund that comes from Groundspeak and goes, here's your $5,000 to start this off. It's just guidelines is what you get. You do get some support, but it's not financial support, and it's not like a book on how to host a mega. So I give props to anybody that puts one on, and that I go to. I'm very happy that they've been able to put that together for us as attendees.
Yeah, and some of the events will pass around a book with knowledge that's been collected from the previous one, but a lot of that information doesn't apply from one year to the next. It doesn't apply from one venue to the next.
No.
So it is largely learning. And in some cases, there's some kind of seed money that transfers. But I think most of the mega events now, you have to make your events self-sustaining, and anything that's left over at the end gets donated to a charity.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's how Moga went. And I was very impressed by that because I'd never seen that before. Moga they have a company that they formed for this purpose, whatever, but it's very organized. They raise all the money. Everything extra goes to charity, but when they start next year, they have that seed money to start with. So they're not having to scramble and do all that other stuff. And it seemed very well organized. And of course, anytime they're raising money for charity, I'm kind of a sucker for that. So I think they're doing a great thing, especially when it's a local, so that one moves around like some of the ones do. So they pick that area, and then they're actually, when they leave that area, it's not just, hey, we had this big event come through and they may have or may not have spent money and now there's a bunch of trash. They leave, they organize the cleanup afterwards, and they've donated a bunch of money to local charity. That's great for a town. So I was very impressed with that. It's one of the reasons why we'll continue to go to Mogas.
All right. We are over half an hour now. And before we get into some of the other stuff, I want one thing to sink into everyone, that I can't ever stress this one enough. When you go to these events, they're never in areas expecting this many people using their cell phones and radios that much. So don't expect to have working communications. Text messaging is pretty good. That usually works. You'll get some problems, even if the phones don't work. So plan on text messaging with the people in your party. Don't plan on having working data. Don't plan on getting phone calls in or out, because even if you do have good cell phone coverage in that area, if you have 1,500 people descending on this small little fairground or park that normally would have maybe 50 to 100 people, it's not going to support that kind of traffic in those towers. And we've seen this over and over again. Almost every mega event gets slammed, and they don't have the communications capacity. Not to mention, I talked about the radios. Your little FRS and GMRS radios, those channels get so swamped with other cachers trying to use them. In most cases, you're not going to get a clean channel, and you're going to be talking with someone else on the same channel. So, don't plan on those being private. Don't plan on those being terribly useful, because you will have some issues even with the old-fashioned walkie-talkies. Make sure that you have your communications plan. And if you're smartphone caching, which I highly recommend, I always do that, especially because of the lab caches, which we'll have to get into in a little while too. But make sure that you've cached your caches. You downloaded them to your offline list. If you can, do the maps. make sure you have everything you can possibly need offline, because you will not be able to download in a reasonable time frame those kind of things. But the lab caches, those you really kind of need to have the online connection. Unless, I have seen some of the events where they'll have a computer set up to load the lab cache information onto your GPSR. So if you bring the GPSR, and definitely bring your GPSR, and again, get it loaded, even though some of the events will have those caches, the nearby caches, load up your own, make sure that you've got it. You don't want to have to wait in line for that, as well as everything else. But if the lab caches aren't available on the website, make sure that you pick up the sheet or whatever. And you know what? We're talking about lab caches, but I don't know if everyone knows what those are. Chris, can you give a good short explanation of what the lab caches are?
I'll do my best. They are basically virtual caches. They send you to a spot, you get a piece of information, type that in, and it says, hey, that's right. And off you go. Daryl, I was just at an event a couple of weeks ago with some lab caches, and the organizers of the event thought ahead and had sheets printed out with coordinates and a space for the answer. So, you could do this if, I was in Canada. So, I went ahead and used data, but if you didn't have data, that would have been a great solution to do that. Anyway, so
they're kind of the new solution to virtuals, but
really
right now they're only really available to megas and to special things. Like a couple of movies have had lab caches set up as well, a couple of exhibits. But for the last few years, it seems like it's only the megas, and each mega typically does 10 lab caches.
Or if you know a lackey. I'm only saying, I've gone to some events with 25 people there, and they have lab caches.
Nice.
Now, I suddenly just blanked out Limax in the Q&A or in the chat there. Sorry, my mind's somewhere else. Says, how long do lab caches usually last? And thank you, Memphis Mafia. About a week. Mm-hmm. Now,
about an hour.
About an hour, depending on data. Man, you know what? I'm just going to stop.
Yeah, it does depend a lot on the event. When you have a week-long event, it's usually the week of the event and then a week after the event, so everyone can get home to a computer and log it. But some of the week events only have it on one day. Right. And this is especially true for Midwest GeoBash. Only has, in some cases, the lab cache is set up for 4 hours. So you have to do the lab caches in 4 hours. And the last one that I remember like that, they had a bunch of games that were just in this one area. And you had to play the games in that area for that time. And if you didn't get to do it because they had to tear it down and use it for something else later.
Now,
go ahead. We did the ones for Geo Woodstock. I got to build 3 of those lab caches, and it may have changed since then, but they told us exactly how long we were allowed to keep them active. So it was 7 days at the time. Now, even though 7 of them were out around town in a brewery tour. You go to different breweries, you get the code, pretty simple like that. 3 of them were on the grounds of the mega, so they were really only available to solve that one day. However, you could log them up to, I think at that time it was up to 5 or 6 days afterwards because they started a day before or whatever. But so those were kind of temporary amounts of time too. Those were only available on the grounds of the mega during that day.
Well, and I've seen stuff as simple as walk up to any volunteer and ask them for this keyword, to actual caches that you have to find and get the keyword out of them. There's games that you have to play, puzzles that you have to solve, the virtual kind of stuff like we did in St. Louis, where you had to run around town getting information off of signs. That was awesome. I really enjoyed that one. And then I've heard stories about actual performances that are the lab cache. This is the one in the UK, and I can't remember which one it was, is the one that sticks in my mind, where they actually had like a lab tech at the scene, and you had to interact with the lab tech. It was like a bit of performance art to get the code.
That's cool. Ours weren't that elaborate. The ones that I got to do, we had one that was at the top of a climbing wall, but of course we had an option. If you didn't want to climb, you could just ask the guy running it for the code. And then one was just kind of a scavenger hunt type thing on the ground. You had to end up finding the sign that was there. And then we had one that was meant to be super easy, but it confused a couple people until they heard it. So we had the booths, and Sonny and Sandy were out there for the event, and we had them record ahead of time like a radio spot, and it would just loop, and it was playing. We just had it playing on the speakers, so it sounded just like a radio spot that was playing over and over. But at one point in it, they had Sean read the code, so you had to listen to the radio spot that was playing, and Sean would eventually read the code, and people liked that. You know, that those three were a little bit creative, but you could only get them for that limited time. So no live actors, but we did have a recorded voice. So,
well, I think they did the same thing at Going Caching, but Going Caching is another event. I have to make it to that one. We've had them on the show a couple of times. Go back and listen to those if you haven't. I highly recommend it, just because that is the mega event in the States.
I was going to say, I think it's a different category than all these other events we've been talking about.
Because it's a different class than any of these others, but it's kind of a hybrid, mostly a challenge, like the games like Moga or something like that.
Kind of Moga.
Yeah, but it's Moga with a theme, and it's not the geocaching games of like Moga. It's its own entity.
And is that one it takes always in the same place?
They've moved it around, but it's the same crew that puts it on. And like last year, they had to move it out of Rome, Georgia, because Rome, Georgia is one of those small little towns. They do a few big festivals every year, and for some reason, it fell on the same time as another festival in town, so they couldn't do it. So they moved it out to a town. But it started out as going coastal, and it was actually on the coast. Then they brought it back to Rome, Georgia, and they've done just some amazing themes, like an Indiana Jones style theme where the coin had a ruby or something in it.
An offset crystal.
Yeah, and you had to put it in the right hole, and then like a laser beam would shine on the location. They had other ones, like last year it was Time Travelers, I believe. They had the steampunk, something like that. Yeah. The year before that, I want to say it was no, I think Roman. It was actually Doctor Who theme this last year.
Roman.
Because wasn't that the Whovian coin? Yeah. The year before was Monty Python Roman. So it was like the Holy Grail, and they did a bunch of skits. There's like performances. It's like incredible amount of work, and it's one family that's in charge of this thing every year with lots and lots of help and just amazing people. Wonderful, wonderful people, beautiful coins. They do trading cards. This is like a full-time job, I'm sure, putting this thing on every year.
Definitely on the list. It's definitely on the list. We want to do that one eventually.
I've requested the time off. Hopefully everything goes well and I can actually hit that one this year.
Daryl, before we
I don't even know how to
far
plan.
off of lab caches.
Yes.
There's a geo trail out here in Spokane, and somehow they've managed to get lab caches for an entire year.
Yeah, there's a lot of variance in the lab caches, but for megas, I think it's the duration of the event and then a few days after. But I think you were saying, Memphis Mafia, that you guys were told it was 7 days is all you could do for the lab caches.
It was at the time. Now that, I don't know if they've changed that. Obviously, they've changed it because they've done some other things with it since then. But yeah, they told us we could only keep them active for 7 days.
Well, I'm wondering if that was because the event is 7 days, maybe. But I think it's entirely up to them what they do, because even before that, we had Earth 2 something or other, I think, that had lab caches up for an entire month. And then there was an Egyptian exhibit in Philadelphia, maybe. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe it could have been Baltimore, but there was an Egyptian exhibit where they had the lab caches up for the duration of that exhibit, which was like 3 or 4 months. And they've done the same thing for a lot of the GPS maze exhibits, where they'll have the lab caches for the duration of that exhibit.
Well, if they're sticking true to what a lab cache seems to be designed for, the rules should change on it all the time. It's supposed to be experimental, so hopefully they're trying different things out with it. And if they come out tomorrow and say, well, now it's 15 for every mega, okay, that's great. The lab caches, are supposed to be different and change. They're not supposed to be just traditional caches. That's why they're so neat. Is there something different and they change, and you can't just get them everywhere.
Yeah, I'd really hoped that they would have done something with the lab caches by now, because it's been at least 5 years. And the lab caches, were intended to test different things and eventually come out of the lab and become real caches. And my thought, they were originally working on these lab caches, and there was 1 year for the I Heart Geocaching promotion where all premium members got to create their own lab cache. It didn't go so well. I think that's kind of why it stuck in the lab and never came out. Yeah, but they didn't give people enough time to really learn and understand how it works, and they were only good to give to one other person. So
well, and
it really wasn't a good test.
No, and if you've built labs for a mega event, if you go on the lab page, so you get temporary access to the lab builder, to build these caches, and there's a bunch of options on there, but most of them are not active yet. They say they will be active. Like you can add videos to it or add a lot of other stuff to it. So a bunch of those are options, but you can't use them. At least you couldn't back when I built mine. All I could pretty much do was do text and a question. So there wasn't options for anything else.
Yeah, and I can't imagine that they're going to allow for that, just because they are trying to keep it accessible to the GPSR users. So by adding things like the video, you're not making it offline. And that, I think, is part of that whole lab thing, is they started getting into it and getting that particular feedback. Though at some point, I'm sure that's going to change, because we are seeing every year the number of smartphone cachers increase and the number of GPS only cachers decrease. We still see a lot of people with both, but more often than not, it's smartphone cachers now.
And I'm one of those. I'm an all the way smartphone cacher. So that GPSR that I mentioned that I won at that mega event, I still haven't found a cache with it. And that was like 5 years ago or 3 years ago or something.
We talked about this last week. I still don't use my GPS like I want to.
I just don't want to. I'm a smartphone guy. I started with a smartphone, and I haven't found a reason yet to switch. So
hey, the reason is you can put your geocaches on the GPSR and your Munsies on the smartphone and go hunt both. Or you'll play Pokemon Go on the smartphone.
That's right. My smartphone is smart enough to do both. So
yeah,
I have
but
a smarter smartphone.
Between.
Okay,
yeah, it's okay.
What do you do when you don't have cell coverage? I mean, say you're going to another
same thing
country.
You do with a GPS. Nothing if you haven't loaded them ahead of time.
Got to load them ahead of time. Yeah,
that's right. Same with a GPS, right?
Yep.
But at least with a smartphone, you have an option to load something on the road. You can't with a GPS.
Right.
But that's a different subject. We'll go down that rabbit hole.
It'll take some work. Anyway, all right.
We'll be on that one for hours. We have to get away from that.
Yeah, we've got to wrap this up pretty quick here. So, does anyone have like a last minute suggestion that they want to put out there?
If you're near a mega event, go. Just don't even think about it. Go. I mean, really, there's going to be one that's not far from you. Eventually, you need to go.
Yeah. So what I would say the two big things. I mean, we could go on all night, but the big things about a mega is, yes, go to one. And if you're going to go to one, do a little planning ahead of time, because if it's not in your backyard, it's a place that you may not have cached before. So figure out what's in that area that you want, download them ahead of time, because there may not be cell service. And, whether you're working on challenges and there's some rare cache there, or the oldest cache, or of course you got to get the lab caches, or webcams, since they're shrinking as fast as we can log them. I think we're down to 118 active ones in the US right now.
Yeah.
So you got to get those as fast as you can, because they may not be there by the time you get back. But one thing we've learned going to megas is, if you can, not everybody can, but if you can, put an extra day in outside of the mega event. So stay for one extra day or get there an extra day early, so you can do those caches that are unrelated. And then while the event's going on, you can slow down, talk to the people that you haven't met before or have met online, or, you know, I'd say 90% of my friends nowadays are geocachers. I've met through geocaching, and, you know, I've met in the last 5 years, and you'll make connections there and friends that you may have for a long time. So if you build that extra day in, you can still get all your caching in, but also slow down and hit the side events, hit those things that the megas are good for. That's the people. You're not there just for caching. You're there to meet people. So that would be the thing I would say. Pack in the time if you can.
I want to add one more thing.
Okay,
Buy
go.
something.
Yeah.
When you go to the mega event, register for it, get a package, because that helps fund the event. And Memphis Mafia, you pointed out that, you know, there's no funding coming in other than what people are spending. So spend a little bit of money. Help them out.
Oh, wait, I need a mulligan. One more thing. Volunteer.
Oh, there you
If
go.
you have the time, volunteer. That's what makes events. They need volunteers. If you have the ability, the time, whatever else, play some small part. You'll get to see the background of it anyway, which is really neat. And it makes it go a lot smoother. The more people they have to help these large events, the better.
Well, and in some cases too, you get extra swag.
That is true.
Even if it's only a t-shirt that says staff, it's still, you know, swag. My one last tip is going to be, don't fail to plan. However, expect not to stick to that plan, because inevitably you're going to get there and discover that there's something that you want to do, someone you want to talk with, and you're going to go all off schedule. Don't get bent out of shape about it. Don't worry about it. You plan on not sticking to your plan. So that's all I have.
That's a good one.
All right. Thanks a bunch, Memphis Mafia, for joining us once again. And of course, people can catch you every week, or well, almost every week when you're not out doing other things, on Geo Talk or Geocache Talk. Man, I just want to call it Geo Talk all the time. But of course, they can also catch you on things like your Periscope. Actually, are you still doing the Periscopes?
We do them some. We've been traveling lately. Most of our travel lately has been areas where we can't Periscope. There's just no service. So we haven't done as many, but we're going to try to get back on there again. Do what?
You could use a GPSR for that.
For Periscope, yeah. I haven't figured the GPSR good enough out to do it yet.
I'm giving you a hard time.
See, but that's another good reason to use the GPSR, so that you can Periscope at the same time.
So there you go. Look at that. That would do it, I guess.
Because live streaming takes over your entire smartphone.
It does. It does. We cache as a family, so that's never been a problem, though.
So if you have multiple devices, you're fine. Yeah. And that's the way I like to do it. Always bring extra people so that you don't have to actually find the cache.
You can just film them finding the cache.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. Well, thanks again, and we'll be sure to put some links in the show notes for all of that stuff too. We've got some great shows coming up, though. Next week, we're going to be talking with Rock Chalk about his caching, or Road Caching 13. Then the following week is going to hopefully be the return of Scott Burks for Randomized Licks, and we've got some good stuff coming up for that show as well.
It's the name.
Just the name is
just
good.
The name alone.
It's
Scott
such a tasty name.
It's worth it.
Even if he hasn't been caching lately. Anyway, then we're going to have Jennifer of Team AJK on to talk about some tools for puzzle caching. Now, this is going to be one that we're going to need some help with, actually. On August 10th, we're doing a show on live streaming again by request of our listeners. However, live streaming has changed quite a bit since we've done the last two shows on it, and it changed a lot in between those shows as well. But at this point, I don't know a whole lot of people doing geocaching live streaming. So if you do, please let us know who they are and what platforms we can find them on. And if you're doing live streaming, we'd love to know what you're using as well. So that's going to be on August 10th. You have plenty of time to get that in, but please let us know, what your thoughts are on it, and be sure to get that in because, like Meerkat has disappeared. I think that happened before the last show. Periscope seems to be down. Even Facebook Live, which started to see some adoption, pretty much from what I understand, doesn't have much happening aside from like brands.
Mm-hmm.
However, YouTube seems to be up and coming, and I understand Twitch is doing the same. So, we need some insight from you. What geocachers are you watching on live streaming, and how are you doing that?
Love it. Until then, check the Cachemaniacs website at cachemaniacs.com for more on the GeoGearHeads, including show notes from this and all of our episodes. We love hearing from our listeners, so leave us feedback by emailing geogearheads at cachemaniacs.com or through social media. Your support helps keep the Cachemaniacs shows coming. Please consider becoming a patron through the link on our website to support the Cachemaniacs shows. GeoGearHeads is produced by Chris Umfenauer and Daryl Wattenberg. This show's copyright 2017 by Daryl Wattenberg. All rights reserved.
Cash with a Cachemaniac.